Hello, patrons and channel members. It's just a short and sweet narration for you. Thank you so much for supporting me on these platforms. This is called My Haunted House. I had what many people would call a warped childhood. Many children are raised on nursery rhymes, fairy tales, and Dr. Seuss. And while my childhood did have these memories, my mother included another genre in mine and my sister's upbringing: horror. I cannot count the number of times when my sister and I were reading some of Stephen King's short stories for bedtime, rather than a more common children's story. Popsy was always my favorite. I grew up watching the classic horror movies and being told ghost stories. Many people, when I tell this to them, ask me if I had a lot of nightmares as a child as a result. But the truth is quite the opposite. I was not afraid of boogeymen or ghosts. To me, ghosts and goblins were simply fictional characters that were only in books, movies, and in stories told around a campfire. The horror genre was simply a part of my life. I loved the feeling of being scared. And so, naturally, Halloween was one of my favorite times of the year. I remember one Halloween many years ago. I was young, but not so young that I don't have first-hand memories of the events that soon to follow. There was a Halloween attraction that was running just down the street from our house. It had been going on every Halloween for a few years, but my parents had never let my sister and me go before. And then, one year, we were finally given permission to go to this haunted attraction. The attraction was built into an old and abandoned manor house, just the sort of place where you would expect a Halloween attraction to be built. I remember being very excited as I walked into the house, because lots of people that were coming out were raving about how scary it was, and I was highly anticipating having my own time inside. Like most Halloween attractions, they let the people inside the house in small groups. Because my sister and I were only children, the attendants at the door made sure that we were put in the same group as our parents. And finally, we stepped inside. Inside, it could have been any haunted house in America in the 90s, full of fake fog and grease-painted actors. I wasn't overly scared because my mother always reminded me that the actors are not allowed to touch you. But I jumped and screamed along with everyone else when a monster jumped out of the hidden nooks and crannies of the old manor house. Eventually, we made our way into the basement, which had been changed into the stereotypical mad doctor's setting. It's common in a lot of haunted houses. Needless to say, there was a lot of fake blood everywhere. But I'll never forget that basement, because something seemed just a little out of place. Sometimes even the most normal things can become diabolical if you alter the perspective. It's something you see in a few modern ghost hunting shows and B-shots. There was nothing that immediately jumped out as being evil, and there was certainly nothing like The Exorcist happening to tip me off that something was wrong. It was a simple sight, but that made it much more unnerving because it stood out against the overt horror backdrop of the decorated room. In the midst of the bloody carnage of the Mad Doctor's operating room, I remember that an old woman was sitting in the far corner of it. She looked to be in her 80s, had thinning gray hair, and was very thin. I'd be lying to myself if I said that she didn't scare me more than the rest of the attraction combined. At the time, I didn't have much understanding of the effects the different physical ailments could have on a person. But looking back now, I would say that she was a victim of a bad stroke. Sometimes a bad stroke will leave a person with one side of his or her face paralyzed, and that's exactly what had happened to her. One side of her face was drooping, and saliva was leaking from the corner of her drooped mouth. She was talking, yelling at us as we passed. Her words were badly slurred because of her paralyzed face, but I could make out what she was yelling. "Stop! Get out!" Over and over again. Even passing through the basement and going out the other side, I could still hear her screaming in that awful slurred way up the stairs. I was extremely disturbed by the sight of the old woman, but as I got away from her, I began to feel better. She was obviously an actor who was working for the attraction. Most of the attraction worked on jump scares, and she was obviously there to cater more to psychological horror. Well, in any case, it worked. Or it certainly worked on me. We emerged out into the night once again, and got that instant sense of relief that makes horror so addicting. The "we have survived" moment. My sister instantly began to talk about which part was her favorite. An actor who jumped out at her in a werewolf costume had been her favorite, and when it came my turn to share, I could think of nothing besides the old woman I'd seen, and I told my family about how the old woman in the basement had scared me the most. "What woman in the basement, Ashley?" my mother asked. Shocked, I began to describe as well as I could of what I just saw, and when I had finished, my mother said that she hadn't seen any woman fitting the description down in the basement. The rest of the family agreed with her. I put the incident out of my mind. Like I said, I didn't believe in ghosts, and didn't believe that they were real. I tried to rationalize why they had missed the old woman and her screams. Each attempt to do this was more pathetic than the last, but I knew that ghosts couldn't be real. The next year, I was eager to step foot in the old manor again, but I was horrified to discover that the haunted attraction had been shut down and would not be opening. Since I lived so close to the haunt, a few people in my neighborhood had taken up jobs there, and I asked around with them about why it had closed. The few people that would talk told me that the old manor house was really haunted with real ghosts, and that too many people were refusing to work there again because of the paranormal activity going on there. Their stories ranged from objects moving on their own, to apparitions, and even to physical attacks against the living that entered certain parts of the house. I laughed it off. People were just letting the atmosphere of the Halloween haunt mess with them. It was probably just a couple of pranksters messing with the workers. But no matter how much I tried to explain to the workers about how it could be a couple of jokers messing around, they kept insisting that it was impossible for it to have been any human activity. But even as I tried to convince them, I couldn't help but remember the old woman that I had seen in the basement that no one else had. I was kind of nervous about the whole thing, and I wanted more information about the house. Now these days you could look up anything on the internet and have an answer in seconds, but the 90s? Well, the 90s were not like that. Few people had internet at the time, and my family was one that did not have internet access, and so I went to the next best thing. My mother. I asked her about the old manor house. At first, she was reluctant to tell me, which unnerved me more than anything because she had never shied away from telling us things of that nature before. But finally, she told me what she knew. The manor started out as a private residence built in 1922, but the original owner lost the house in foreclosure. After that, it became a sanitarium, which is something like a small hospital. And just by virtue of being a hospital in an area where it was the only hospital around at the time, a lot of people passed away within those walls. In fact, there were some reports that say there was at least one death a day within those walls during that time. But that was not even the part that my mother was reluctant to tell me. She told me that afterward, it was turned into a nursing facility, and they would have taken care of sick older people just like the old woman I had seen during my walkthrough. But the record of abuse that came out of that place was numerous. Many ex-employees confessed that they quit soon after being hired because of the vast amount of malpractice that had happened there. My mother remembered all of this because it was in the newspapers when I was growing up. It was a huge deal within the community. It made me feel sick a little to think about how those people, those human beings, were treated in that horrible place. And that's not all. Local legend has long said that the building was haunted by the tortured souls of the people who died under the horrible conditions there. The man who built the Halloween attraction there knew of the history and the legends surrounding the place, and built the attraction with the sole purpose of playing off of those stories. It was then that I knew that I had seen the ghost of a woman who had died in the building. She just wanted to spend her afterlife in peace, but instead, every year she and her fellow ghosts were interrupted by the living storming through their place in the thousands, turning their situation into a joke. And for the first time ever, I began to treat ghosts and spirits not as fictional creatures only meant to frighten and scare, but as a real physical manifestation of a force that humans are not capable of understanding yet. This house, to this day, continues to be a hotspot for paranormal activity. The owner lets in a local paranormal group at least once a week, every Friday night, to do an investigation. Several ghost-themed television shows have filmed at the location. One show brought in a psychic medium who claims that the years the house spent as a Halloween attraction has forever scarred the house and the spirits who reside there. But one thing is for sure, I'm now a lot more careful about checking out the history of any Halloween haunt that I go to. Ghosts are everywhere, of course, but I'll never go to a place with such a sad history attached to it. And I haven't been able to get scared inside a Halloween attraction since. I don't scream, I don't jump or run away as the actors jump out at me. Nearly all my friends have commented on my bravery in the face of these Halloween attractions. But I'm not brave, not really. It's just a lack of fear. Because it's hard to get scared by actors and makeup when you've seen the real thing. My sister got stuck in a gap in our house's foundation. You know, I never liked living in this house. It's an old, run-down fixer-upper that my foster parents bought for a couple of grand on Craigslist. My older sister and I used to live in an upscale apartment when our biological parents were still in the picture, although I don't remember much of it. I only recall that it was pretty high up in the building, and that it was much more hospitable than the glorified shack we live in now. I was 5 back then, so it's not exactly fresh in my mind. I'm 15 now, by the way. Let me put it to you the most accurate way possible. It looks totally abandoned, for one. Picture a haunted house on the top of the hill, and you pretty much got it. There's a reason we don't get any mail, and it's because nobody else knows we're here. Once my sister and I were playing tag on the front porch. A neighbor called the cops on us because she thought we were trespassing. I doubt anyone in town realizes that we live on this property. The floorboards are completely warped, and they either creak loud enough to shatter glass, or give out altogether when you step on them. Half of the wooden pillars that make up the structural integrity of the house are either rotten or infested with termites. Or both. And then there's the house's foundation, which has thousands of gaping holes in it and is slowly sinking to the ground. If there's one benefit to being here, it's that our foster parents spent all their money on expensive furniture and appliances. We got a flat-screen TV, and we even have one of those Google Home things, so at least they care enough to do that. But that's the extent of their caring. They go out every day to do some sort of business in the city, which probably involves something illegal. And so my sister and I are alone almost all of the time. Which brings me to today. You see, my sister's 18, and I think teenage hormones have been a bit unkind with her. She's completely and utterly unbearable to be around. She's arrogant and impulsive, and she resorts to violence whenever I step over my boundaries in the household. I mean, sometimes she's nice, but only if I'm really, really submissive. Compared to the happy little girl that used to play tag with me on the porch, she's a completely different person. And I think the hormones have been also affecting her eating habits, because she's pretty overweight for her age, which leads me on to the events of this evening. We were in the backyard roasting hot dogs over a bonfire that we'd constructed when she was in a more light-hearted mood. The mosquitoes were just beginning to come out, and the sky was darkened with gray clouds. My sister was laying on the ground, texting with a friend, and I suggested we go inside for the night before it started to rain. I was walking toward the back door of the house when I noticed a large hole in the concrete foundation just below the stairs. It was about 1.5 feet in diameter, and it was just visible above where the foundation was sunken into the ground. I'd never noticed it before. I'm not even sure it had been there before that day. Of course, I was plenty familiar with the numerous cracks that riddled the outside walls. This one seemed off. I peered inside looking to see if it led to our cellar. However, it was completely black, and I couldn't see anything. To be sure, I opened the entrance to the cellar, and I turned on the lights. As I'd expected, the walls of our basement didn't border that side of the house. I exited the cellar, leaving the lights on, and sure enough, the hole was still dark and showed no sign of connection to the house. There was definitely a space behind it. I could feel cool air coming from inside, and I could hear the wind venting into it. Curious, I crouched down and called out, "Hello?" It reverberated eerily across the chamber, and I realized this space was a lot bigger than I had thought. Chunks of concrete lay on the grass next to the hole, as if something had broken it from the inside. I was about to turn away when I heard, faintly, the skittering of something on gravel. I looked back, but still couldn't make anything out. Maybe it was a groundhog or a raccoon, I thought. At least I had hoped. At this point, my sister had gotten up and seen what I was doing. She strolled over to me, clearly impatient for me to get inside. "What in the hell are you looking at?" she shouted at me. I cringed. Up until a few years ago, the thought of my sister swearing was much of an impossibility as the sun's setting in the east. She had been one of the friendliest kids in our neighborhood, and one of the best students in school. Seeing the hulking brute that stood before me made me wish for those times again. "I found a hole in the house," I replied. "Big whoop. Our entire house is made up of holes." "No, but this one leads somewhere." I pointed to the gap, which, looking back on it, was tempting fate. She approached it, clearly unimpressed. "Wow, amazing. An old house that has a big hole in it." She clutched my wrist. "Now come on, it's going to start raining any second now." Suddenly, a scraping noise rang out from the darkness. We looked at each other, clearly confused. "It's probably just some floorboards falling in," she said, "or an animal or something trapped down there." And then we heard, just barely over the rushing of the wind, a very distinctive, very human sound. That's crying," I whispered. "Somebody's crying down there." "Hey!" my sister yelled into the pitch darkness. "Who's in there? I don't know if you're some hobo or whatever, but you need to go." The darkness responded with a deep wail, barely audible. It sent chills down my spine. She had a worried look on her face, the first time I'd ever seen that from her. "You sound like some little kid. Are you lost? Did you run away from somewhere?" She shoved me aside and bent to peer into the gap, her shirt riding up her torso. But this time, there was complete silence. We looked at each other once more, this time with an obvious sense of trepidation. "What should we do?" I asked. She got out her phone and turned on its flashlight, turning it towards the darkness. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The light was able to illuminate a small portion of the inside space. We could see pipes running through the floor. most of them rusted and dented beyond repair. Insulation covered almost every wall, crawling with insects. Layering the ground below was a thin sheet of gravel, which was peppered with nails and screws from the disintegrating house. It stretched a long way to the left and to the right, and there was a substantial drop on the right, where the ground descended into an inky black chamber. Suddenly, thunder boomed from directly overhead. I yelled, startled, and my sister dropped her phone, which skittered across the gravel and into the hole. "You son of a bitch," she shouted. "You assholes, you scared the shit out of me." She turned away, looking at her phone, which had its flashlight facing upwards, light shining on the ceiling space. I could tell where this was going, but before I could react, she had already crawled forward into the small gap. Inevitably, her girth soon prevented her from moving forward. The opening was completely swallowed by her figure. I could see her legs trying to grasp for leverage on the muddy ground, but it was hopeless, and soon she had stopped trying. "Do you want me to pull you out?" I yelled through my cupped hands. There was no response. "I said, do you want me to pull you out?" If she had responded, I couldn't have heard her. "Okay, I'm pulling you out." I grabbed her leg and prepared to tug, but was met with a swift kick in the jaw. "Kick the ground with both feet if you could hear me," I shouted into the wall. After a minute of no movement, I could tell the insulation was preventing sound from traveling through. I ran into the house and grabbed my phone from my room and sent a message to her phone asking if she was okay. I ran back outside, where it had just begun to rain. A sense of relief washed through me as I received a reply. "Am okay," was able to reach phone. I texted back, "Can you get out?" She responded with, "No, I'm wedged in here. I'm such a fat fuck." This was the first time I'd heard her mention her weight, much less feel ashamed about it. I was tempted to mock her for all the crap she'd given me, but I realized that I had more important things to focus on. The rain poured down on my head as I typed back, "Can you still hear whatever's in there?" "Yeah, it's coming from the right side, I think." "I could try to pull you out." "Okay, do it. It's creepy in here. Whoever is over there, I just want to get out." I grabbed her legs one more time, flinching instinctively, but then realizing that her kicking wouldn't help her situation. I tugged as hard as I could, but no matter how hard I strained, she wouldn't budge. I notified her of the situation. "Not working. Try sucking in and pushing from inside." "I was sucking in, and I can't. The gravel's too loose." This was beginning to look like a futile effort. I was about to head inside and call our foster parents for help. Then I remembered they hadn't paid the phone bill in weeks. A boom of thunder rang out, causing me to jump a little. I considered leaving her there and waiting until she had burned enough off to get out of her own. But then she sent me a text. "There's a scraping sound coming closer." Now, I was truly scared. What if a person was luring us down there, like some sort of serial killer? "I don't care what you do. Break the wall or something, just get me out." I didn't know what to do. There was no way she was getting out of there without making the gap larger, but I didn't know if we had anything capable of cracking the concrete. I ran to the tool shed and began frantically rummaging through the tool shelf. "It's getting louder." As I scavenged the shelf, I cut myself on a rusty screwdriver. The pain was searing, and I knew it was in danger of being infected, but I ignored it and continued searching. "Please get me out now." Desperately, I dropped the box I was holding and began typing. "Can you see anything if you shine your light around?" Leaving blood smeared on the screen, I lifted away another toolbox and finally found a sledgehammer. I heaved it over my shoulders and ran outside, the rain beating down on my face. "No, but it's getting closer." I ran to my sister's wedged form and thrust the hammer into the wall, cracking it loudly. She kicked the ground, trying desperately to free herself. "Please get me out, or go to the neighbors and call 911. I didn't want to leave my sister alone. With a final swing, a chunk of the foundation came out, coming to rest on her back. It allowed a little more room, but not enough to get her out. "Please help." Exhausted from lifting the heavy sledgehammer, I strained my arms and swung it over my back once more. However, the rain caused it to slip from my hands, coming down hard into the mud. I texted frantically. "I'm trying, just hold on for a few more minutes. Are you okay?" There was no response. "Hello?" Again, no response. Thunder boomed from far away. "Are you okay? Please answer." I was about to pick up the sledgehammer again when I received a reply after an agonizing 2 minutes. "I can hear crying in front of me." I thrust my arms upward sharply, a blinding pain flowing through my back. I couldn't hold it any longer. I dropped it and began pulling my sister as hard as I possibly could, feet dragging in the mud. "I'm trying to push outwards. It stopped." I hesitated. Had the person given up? I let go of her legs, wondering if I could make it to a neighbor's house, explain who I was, and convince them to let me use their phone before they changed their mind. I decided it was worth the risk. I stood up, shielding my face from the downpour, and stopped trudging my way towards the nearest house. I texted, "I'm going to get help," turning back and looking at her, as if there was a chance she'd gotten out on her own. And what happened next was horrifying. I thought it was just my imagination at first, but I realized she had actually begun to inch her way into the hole. But as I saw her legs kicking as she moved forward, I realized that she wasn't doing it. As her figure was squeezed forward, I could see the concrete digging into her stomach, causing streams of blood to pour from the folds. Then it stopped, reaching a point where she could go no further. Nothing happened for a moment, and I wondered whether I should go back to try to help her further. And within that second of hesitation, I watched as my sister's body twisted violently in its prison, sending out a spray of blood and forcing her instantly into the space, disappearing into the blackness. It happened so quickly I could barely react. 1 second she was wedged in there, and a split second later she had been pulled into the hole. It was like a cork flying out of a champagne bottle. And as I stood frozen with fear, I could hear her screams echoing from inside the chamber, growing fainter and fainter, and then fading into darkness. Nothing but the pitter-patter of the rain on the grass. This happened 1 hour ago. I'm still standing here in my yard. I think I'm in shock, and I don't know what to do. Whatever took her wasn't human, I'm sure of that. No person could have pulled her with that ferocity. I don't really want to go back into the house, but I'm dangerously close to getting hypothermia out here. My back is in too much pain to run to the neighbors. I have to go into the house. I have no choice. And I will. But I think I'll wait for the storm to stop first. House of Rules. I live in a house of rules. I guess I should explain. I moved here 3 months ago, flat number 27. The flat was a repossession. I never met the previous owner, and to date, know him only from the mail that I received in his name. I could make up stories of him vanishing or his screams being heard in the darkness one night. I could make such exaggerated claims, but this is not a work of fiction, nor is it written to entertain. I just got a new job, a promotion that I've been waiting years for. This was meant to be the next step to greater things, but I needed to move quickly to save on the long drive each day. When I found this place, I was overjoyed. It was well located, within my price range, and apart from being extremely run down and dirty, had so much potential. It's a duplex apartment with a guest room and a spare bathroom on the ground floor, and a dressing room and several storage rooms on the top floor. The purchase was a complicated one, due in part to poor record keeping and the loss of deeds and plans of the house. What should have taken a month from start to finish took 4 times as long, and because of this length of time, I took several viewings, and each time was amazed by the windows and cupboards that I could not recall from previous visits. Rooms seemed bigger and lighter, more inviting. Even the estate agent was baffled that their property listing documents were constantly wrong. The neighbors in the block of flats are a strange lot. They don't talk. They keep to routines you could set a clock by. When I first moved in, I tried to invite them to a housewarming. So desperate was I to meet new people. Not one of them came. They get in at the same time every day and never leave the house, and I never hear them moving around at night. One of them, a nervous man from upstairs who constantly fidgets and glances around, apologized afterward. He explained his lack of attendance was simply because he wasn't allowed to. At the time, I presumed he meant by his wife, but now I'm not so certain. As he was the only one I'd gotten to know since the move, I did my best to become friendly, and even felt like I was making headway. Then I made the mistake of asking about the previous owner, to which he made an awkward and short response before making his excuses. I've not seen or heard from him since. The rules, as I came to understand them, became apparent over time. The first was sleeping only in my bedroom. I slept once in the lounge on purpose, dozing on the sofa, until I woke up to my arm trapped between the sofa and the wall, a wall that was several feet away when I closed my eyes for a few hours earlier. I was overcome with a feeling, a very familiar feeling, that I was somewhere I shouldn't be. This feeling wouldn't leave me until I hurriedly stumbled up to bed, where I only felt truly safe when I hid under the blankets like a scared child. I only fell asleep once more in the lounge after that, by accident. I was woken up again with a feeling that I should leave, that it would be unsafe for me to stay, and that I should not be there. This time, however, a sweater I'd left across the room on a radiator was tied around my neck and pulled tightly enough to leave a striking mark on my throat. The rule of sleeping only in my bedroom stands alongside others, countless others. I learned that I should clean up my dishes immediately when I stepped out of the kitchen, after depositing my plate, and sat down on a safety pin that was jutting out of the back of the sofa. I learned not to take showers too long when the water turns super hot and remains so, no matter how much I desperately tried to turn it off. And then was the inexplicably normal temperature when I tried it moments after. I learned that I must vacuum and keep the place tidy, that I must not waste electricity, and that no matter what noises I hear at night, I should never, ever explore it. Another rule is that guests are not welcome. The last time I had a guest, it was a friend who invited themselves by making arguments to come and see me until I relented. I spent the entire time terrified for their safety, and pretty much drove them away with my strange behavior accordingly. But there were no events. Such things made me bold, and I began to relax. I stayed away until real late, played music all night, and did whatever I wanted, even going so far like I had triumphed, as the house remained meekly quiet. It was almost immediately after they left that I first noticed the headache and nausea, which became worse and worse as the gas leak continued. I only just made it out before I succumbed. I have so many things I could tell you, example after example. I don't know where to begin. I need you to look past your skepticism and see that it is real, that this is more than coincidence, more than just a child's play haunting. I'm not being haunted. I'm being ruled. The rules are only a part of it, though. They're the part I play. The rest is done without me. And not only that, but around me. The walls shift. Doors open some days, but they won't open the next. The number of windows in my bedroom increased one by one over consecutive nights, and then there was only one again. There's a cupboard at the top of my stair that changes in size quite regularly. One of the most terrifying experiences of my life was when I opened it and saw it went back several meters more than what I remembered. When I walked in, somehow the cupboard doors shut behind me. I groped within the darkness, silently searching for a wall I knew must be there, and yet my fingers only touched air. I don't know how long I fumbled around, but it was only as my panic rose that my shaking fingers found the wooden door. Have you ever woken up in a room with the chair sitting at one end of your bed? A chair that came from the dining room, which is down a flight of stairs and along a hallway. Have you ever walked into a room and seen a strange cupboard that was not there before? Have you ever observed more stairs on a staircase as you go down them than there was when you went up? Have you ever entered a room looking for something, and then when you gave up and left, realized an hour and a half had passed? I've lived all these things, and if I were a better, more scientific man, I would have kept a running log of all of it. I would have found proof I need to show the world that I'm not crazy, that this is real, that this is a nightmare that I'm living. 5 hours have passed since I sat down to write this. I had hoped to prepare some lunch today and pray that there are no needles in my bread, like last week when I realized I hadn't vacuumed. Instead, it's getting dark now. I now live a life of routine like my neighbors. I just turned off the music. No loud noises after dark is one of the rules. It is the one I hate the most, because it makes me feel so alone. Lights left on in rooms that are empty or too many in one room are prone to breaking the fuses, or even shattering without warning. So I currently have the glare on the computer screen, the television, and a lamp, and soon I should be going to bed. The doors that shut behind me as I head up to bed lock themselves, and I will wake up in a room with windows wherever they please, and doors that may or not be open to cupboards that could be as small or big as each variation allows. The television in the room I'm in has a satellite connection, and with it, countless channels. Right now, all are a fuzz of static, except for the National Geographic channel, so I'm forced to listen to a documentary on carnivorous plants as I type. I try not to dwell on the exhaustion of a beetle on the screen as it tries in vain to escape from the prison that will soon digest it. I could push the neighbors to talk more. I could rebel against the rules. I could start a fire and torch the whole building. But truly, I just want to get by. I get the feeling that up until now I've simply been coached, like a dog, to do whatever is required of me. I feel like the punishments could get a lot worse, though. The occasional demonstration of strength, the enforcement of the rules, and the occasional mild punishment when I transgress, like when one taps the nose of a dog when it misbehaves. That is what I hope for if I can behave. Stepping out of line causes me nothing but harm. It is only out of fear and preservation of my own human dignity that I do not explain here what happens when the house feels like it really needs to punish me. Needless to say, the scar will be with me for the rest of my life. Which brings us to here. I cannot go on. I took the decision to write this with the remaining fight I still have within me, to at least ask for help. I can't do it over the phone. I cannot write a letter. My only hope is to write it into a story inconspicuously, and without the details that might draw attention to the content. All I can hope is that someone sees enough to spot my cry for help, that they find a way to contact me where I can get the lifeline I need to escape. I cannot ask directly, it is too risky. Besides, any form of open rebellion has been snuffed out of me with pain and suffering and terror. I fear for my safety, for my punishment for breaking the rules. I am surprised that I'm being allowed to even get this far. In over 1,000 words I've written, there hasn't been a power cut or computer error that has lost everything. So perhaps there is still hope. But the truth is that I'm scared. Scared of what touched my face in my sleep the night before last, after I accidentally left a tap running, clutching firmly the bruises on my cheek that still remain. I'm scared of what left a pair of scissors in my slippers, of what power moves wooden doors and plaster walls seemingly at a whim. But most of all, I'm scared that by writing this, I may wake up in a tiny room with no doors or windows. A room that grows smaller every time that I blink.